Hello, KSQD listeners. It's every other Sunday again, and time for Sustainability Now, a bi-weekly KSQD radio show focused on the environment, sustainability, and social justice in the Monterey Bay region, California, and the world. We are your hosts, Brooke Wright and Ronnie Lipschitz. Our guest today is Tahra Goraya, the new president and CEO of the Tri-County Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, also known as MBEP. MBEP works on housing, broadband access, workforce development, renewable energy and climate policy, water conservation and housing needs, regional recycling, transportation, and believe it or not, more. We will be speaking with Tahra about her journey into this role and about what MBEP is and what it is getting done to address climate change and other environmental issues. Tahra, welcome to the Sustainability Now show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Brooke and Ronnie.
Yes, thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Great. Well, for starters, could you just share a little bit about yourself and how you came to live here in Monterey County, right?
That's right. Absolutely. We've been here. Again, my name is Tahra Goraya, and my family and I moved here in January. Coming up close to 6 months here and absolutely enjoying it. How could you not enjoy the greater Monterey Bay region for its beauty and splendor that it offers, right? I always say that it's kind of like the American Riviera, right? All the way from Santa Cruz all the way up to down to Santa Barbara. It's absolutely gorgeous. I have two little girls. My husband and I moved here directly from Boston, although we are both native Californians, and it's happy to be home. We are really happy to be here, and California is home. So we are currently in Monterey County, specifically in Marina.
Nice. And tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and what other work you've done before that's also similar or different.
Absolutely. So, I'm a generalist in that I have done a great number of things in my lifetime thus far. But I would say the common thread really is about how can I make an impact? How can I be part of organizations that are making a difference? Almost every organization that I've been with, whether it was in DC or in Los Angeles or Sacramento, government-affiliated organizations, it's always been about building cross-sector alliances and partnerships that are diverse and inclusive. There's not a single experience I can think of, whether I was working in the harm reduction or early childhood policy. I also dabbled in civil liberties issues, especially post 9/11 on American Muslims' civil liberties specifically. And that was also about building alliances and coalitions of diverse stakeholders to accomplish what we needed to do together. So I think that's pretty much the common thread. I've engaged in similar work in that, again, bringing together different sectors, different industries, different groups of people who normally are not, at the table breaking bread together or having conversations together, figuring out what is the art of possible of working together. So I think in many ways, I've had a similar common thread throughout my career. I think what's probably different is the region that I'm in and the economic development lens specifically, in that it's, as a native Californian, I would often come to Monterey County, specifically to the aquarium. My parents used to bring us out here and we would enjoy coming out. It was a wonderful day trip or a weekend trip. So we have often known obviously the region for its beauty. I think what we don't know is the underlying other issues that are very much present. So I think that's what's different, learning about that, getting more deeply engaged and learning of all the people and places that make this region so rich in culture and language and how beautiful it is beyond what we see and the depth of culture that is here. So that's, I'd say in some respects different, in other ways very similar to other places that I've worked in.
Okay. And tell us a little bit, so you said it was a day trip here. Can you tell us a little bit about where exactly you're from and also rich in culture? You are also rich in culture, I think. So can you share a little bit about that as well?
Well, I've been, I feel like my background and who I am is a huge blessing in sort of defining what I do as both a person and as a professional. A day trip meaning, I'm from Bakersfield, California.
Okay.
So I was born in Sacramento. My parents are Punjabi, Pakistani, and they immigrated here originally to the greater Sacramento area. My father was looking to go to school, pursue his doctorate at UC Davis. I'm the eldest of five. And soon after I came along, they made the trek to Bakersfield, and they are still in Bakersfield. That's where I was raised since I was 6 months of age. And so that's home base, so to speak, where, mom and dad, now grandma and grandpa to my two little girls. And so, yeah, we would drive out, between 3.5 to 4.5 hours with a carload of, 5 kids total and mom and dad. And we would come out here, and it was a rare treat, born to immigrant parents. And we were not always had the means to have the vacations in a traditional sense of the word. But my parents were very creative. They were very innovative, whether it was a day trip or a hike or just to drive. It was through those experiences that I really fell in love with California and appreciated the great terrain and the great beauty. Living in Bakersfield, within 2 hours, we could be at the beach in Pismo. We could be in the mountains, skiing somewhere, or in the Mojave Desert, or in LA. South of us and north of us was Fresno, 2 hours away. So I just grew up with great appreciation. I'm not afraid of, the drive, so to speak. I just feel like, and through that, I think we met and other people. And growing up, there were not very many Muslims, for example, where I was. And so my parents, from the very beginning, fostered this sort of love of knowing the other. Because I think we were always so othered, the appreciation of learning to know other cultures, other races, other languages. So yeah, I grew with that lens, and my father is an agronomist. And so that also gave me a great appreciation for the agriculture, the agribusiness, the folks who, put food on our tables. I kind of learned all of that from a very early age. So, but then again, coming from Bakersfield, we kind of knew it as a cool, breezy ocean life. And we knew about Salinas, and, we knew about the lettuce curtain. But now, as of course, as of much later in my life as an adult who follows a lot of the issues that impact us economically and socially, it's definitely through a different lens at this point. But I remember coming here and having fond memories of that.
Nice. So, and you just mentioned this appreciation for the otherness, and I think that that's certainly, when I looked up some data of this area, there's not a lot of a Muslim presence in this area. So how's that been coming to this area where it may even be less than where you're coming from in Bakersfield? I'm not sure.
Very good question. I think I took it. So growing up in Bakersfield, there were, growing up, not many Muslims at all. I think I could probably count on two hands sort of the number of families.
Oh, wow.
My father is one of the founders of the mosque there, one of the original founding members of the American Muslim community in Bakersfield. Fast forward now, it's a vastly different experience with a lot of mosques and a lot of diverse Muslims too, from Yemen and Mexican American Muslims to people from Pakistan and Bangladesh and a large African American Muslim community. It's very, very diverse in its ethnic and racial sort of makeup, and therefore it has also many places of worship where it didn't. Again, for me growing up, we would drive 2 hours south to LA or 2 hours north to Fresno, where there was a sizable American Muslim community in which we could plug in and attend our religious events like Eid al-Adha or practice Ramadan with other families. It wasn't until I was much later in my life as a child, probably closer to high school age, when there was an establishment where there was a mosque. And now, like I said, fast forward, there were several offerings and opportunities. I would liken it, there are American Muslim community here. There are mosques. I know I've visited one in Santa Cruz. There is one in Seaside, Watsonville, Castroville, I believe, and one in Salinas. Those three I've not visited. But I am not as yet plugged in. I'm still in some ways searching for that aspect of community. But you're right, there is not as sizable community as Los Angeles, where I spent a great number of years, both as an undergrad and as a professional, or in DC, where I also was professionally living, and Boston, where I most recently am moving from. So it is a very different experience, but I'm eager to meet and know people in that space. And I see folks, but I don't know a lot of folks. And it is interesting. It reminds me of Bakersfield, and that growing up, I didn't have that sense of community. There were very few of us. So that has been noticeable, as you make note, that at some level, I think because the Bay Area does have a very sizable and organized community, I assumed that because we're the south of Silicon Valley, that there would be, but I probably not. So I'm still learning in my short 5 to 6 months here, still learning the landscape. But it is obvious that there aren't many of us in the way I show up and am present in rooms, and you can sense and pick up that vibe. And generally, I must say, the reception has been very positive and warm and welcoming. I think people are curious. And at the same time, it shatters whatever their mental model they may have, or stereotypes that may be. I've been, in the professional realm for 15, 20 years, so you can sense that, right? You can sense when you walk into a room. But it's been good thus far. I can't really complain.
Well, I want to hear a little bit about what got you here. But let's first make sure anybody listening learns a little bit more about MBEP. So can you just share a little bit about MBEP, and then, what drew you to come join it?
Absolutely. So, MBEP is a Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. When we, for short, call it MBEP, is a tri-county entity, a nonprofit that serves the counties of Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito. And this footprint serves to improve the economic health and quality of life in the region. And the founders had this vision that it would be a thriving region for all residents, right? So we're relatively young in that we're 7 years old. I am the second CEO and president. So this is sort of part 2 or second chapter, the evolution or growth of MBEP. In terms of the various areas or the overarching vision, is to provide regional leadership, try to be a catalyst for change, look for innovative and regional solutions with the bottom line of what we call the triple bottom line of equity, economic vitality, and the environment. And what that means is bringing together diverse stakeholders across a tri-county region to look at housing, broadband access, economic and workforce development, and also policy. And undergirding, or what's sort of the intersection between those 4 major initiatives that we have, is looking at it through the lens of also simultaneously climate, water, transportation, and education. And when I mean education, it's the cradle to career, sort of the entire spectrum, and health. So, for example, if we're looking at broadband access to reduce the digital divide and inequity in our tri-county region, that dovetails very clearly in our mind around access to health, especially telehealth, as we are still in the midst of the pandemic. And that shed light very clearly about the access to healthcare for some communities. Right. Same goes for education. I think we've read and seen and experienced so many stories nationwide and in our region where students needed assistance to go back. And a lot of that required an active, strong broadband access, which a lot of our communities did not have,
right,
and are slowly coming online.
Let's take a really quick break, and then let's come back to that, because it's really interesting how they all come together. So Absolutely. Let's do that. Thank you. All right, listeners, you are listening to KSQD 90.7 FM and also ksqd.org, streaming on the internet. This is Sustainability Now, And our guest today is Tahra Goraya. And Tahra, tell me how to say your last name properly. I'm sorry if I've butchered it twice now. Tahra?
Okay. It's Tahra, and last name is Goraya. I always tell folks it's like Mariah, but with a G.
Nice. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Tahra Goraya. And she is the new president and CEO of the Tri-County organization, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, also known as MBEP. So you were just sharing a little bit about how the different areas of the focuses of MBEP kind of interconnect. And if you want to tell a little bit more about that with the broadband and how that came to the light.
Absolutely. As I mentioned previously, so with COVID, I think that really shed light on a lot of the inequities, right? Not just nationally, but definitely here regionally in the Monterey Bay area. Connectivity and having access to broadband, we saw it like as a critical need because without internet, it was difficult for kids to truly attend school remotely, right? Or to be able to access their homework or turn things in. And that became a real need. So we sort of, did a quick sort of COVID response on a couple of fronts, one of which was around broadband access, partnering with local ISPs and others, trying to bring them together to see, okay, so how do we truly get internet and broadband connectivity to provide access to those families and to those youth? And we launched what was called Equal Access Monterey Bay. And essentially, it was to bring these folks together and also look for funding and other projects and other avenues and connections. Sometimes I liken what MBEP does kind of as a matchmaking service in some respects, where we are matching private-public partnerships or others to engage in getting some actionable work happen. So whether it's infrastructure dollars or talking to local municipalities, there's county infrastructures or county office of education, how do we connect them with maybe charitable giving and others to make, launch programs where there could be connectivities, right? So it's engaging a broad spectrum of industry stakeholders across sectors, jurisdictions, socioeconomic status, from grassroots to the grass tops, right? And this is large, small, hybrid, everything. And we learned quickly, even with the work we were doing, how nimble we were required to be in order to have virtual or hybrid sort of things. So that's kind of where it was. We were working on broadband, but I think the pandemic really forced us in that space and recognized that there were certainly some communities in our region. And just to use Monterey County as a quick example, our cities in the South Salinas Valley, for example, needed greater connectivity. And coming together under the leadership of former city manager Gonzalez, Renee Mendez, and others, bringing them together, having those conversations, and looking at what's the art of the possible of leveraging fundings and resources to bring connectivity in. And sort of forming that alliances, and I think the MBEP also quickly figured out, in addition to sort of broadband challenges during the pandemic, there was clearly the housing challenges that we were facing, right? With evictions, moratoriums happening, to how can we quickly advocate with our partners, municipalities, and various jurisdictions to, ease those. The moratorium, when expired, what could the cities do locally? How can we provide rental assistance and vouchers and partner with folks? So some of this, especially with the pandemic, forced our team, the housing team and our broadband team, to quickly sort of respond, put programs together, write recommendations, write papers.
Right.
And really, that's kind of the function we serve in the Tri-County region, is to attempt to be as agile as possible to address the need at hand.
Yeah, and those seem like those directly would then tie into climate as well. So I can see where you were talking about that interconnection with the broadband, but this is also a climate issue. If people can live in lower cost housing in South County, they can, if they have good broadband, they don't have to be driving as far. And so you're taking care of a few issues all at once.
Absolutely. Everything, all of this is connected. It's very difficult or I think impossible to divorce oneself, so to speak, from one issue and just solely focus on one issue. They're all interconnected.
Right.
We can't talk about housing without talking about water supply, right? And how many units can go up, or the vehicle miles traveled, and making sure there are transportation hubs nearby. I mean, everything is absolutely interconnected.
Right.
Broadband is directly connected to all of the issues we mentioned, and specifically to education and health.
Right.
It has a more of a clearer nexus, whereas of course it aids in everything else.
Right. So, yeah, with that in mind, you did mention that there's, a lot of different members for MBEP. Cities and counties are members, right? But so are businesses. And are there other kind of stakeholder groups that are also members?
Absolutely. So it's pretty much the door is open to anybody who would like to be a member.
Okay.
MBEP began as a member organization. We're currently, I believe, at 86 members strong. We continue to grow and luckily did not see a reduction during the pandemic. I think folks understood the value we bring because we're bringing research and data and other advocacy to the table and conversations, and bringing diverse stakeholders to have the necessary conversations. So yes, we have counties to local municipalities. We have large organizations like large, for example, ag, to smaller organizations. We also have nonprofits who are members. So large or small, there's room for everybody. We have environmental groups to, like I said, municipalities. We have folks in the energy area like 3CE. I'm thinking off the top of my head. And as I think of some members on our board, for example, we have several banks, hospitals, Driscoll, Taylor, so those are some of not only the founders, but also current members of the board. So it's pretty diverse.
Right.
And we continue to look for that. And we continue to look for diversity, not just in the sectors they represent, but the issues they're interested in.
Right. That was actually a question I wanted to get to, is what kind of role do they play in the issues that MBEP ends up focusing on, and how do you navigate that? Because I imagine some stakeholders might really want you to focus on one thing, or some members, I should say, rather than stakeholders. But how does that process work?
Well, I think it's never easy, but I think what helps is that we have a strong reputation of being bipartisan, data-driven, and focused on the greater good of the community, right? So we're really, truly, the vision is of a thriving region, and thriving region for everybody. Certainly, there are going to be times where not all members will agree, or there may be sort of the organizational maybe, our frame may be at odds with certain members or in policies or bills that we want to help endorse or promote. But our North Star really is about the triple bottom line of equity, environment, and economics, and our four major initiatives around housing for all, and that means all income levels, affordable to market rate, and also looking at employer-assisted housing, and how do we get employers engaged and attract the right labor to the region. We're looking at farm worker housing. We also have a Monterey Bay Housing Trust that supports housing development through that funds. And then with broadband access, that's really to reduce the digital inequity. The economic and workforce development, gosh, that runs the gamut from bring in strong partnerships with our educational institutions with career pathways and tech support to, what kind of pipeline of new workers do we need, and how do we upskill existing workers? How do we make sure and advocate for livable wages, especially in this region? So it's a myriad of conversations around that frame of economic and workforce development, monitoring the trends in our sectors, and being in active communication with our partners to see what their workforce needs are as well. And the fourth major one is around policy, education, and awareness, because I think part of being, strong in this region is to truly partner with not just a legislative bodies or policymakers or the electeds, but it's also the education and awareness at the grassroots, partnering with community-based organizations to help really educate communities, and also from the grass tops have an active engagement with our electeds about what policies make sense. And of course, the sort of the glue in the middle is looking at all of this through the lens of equity and the environment, and water and transportation and health and education, because they're all interconnected. So there's space for everybody, in my mind, to be at the table and to become a member. Membership helps support our initiatives. And help support the work that we do, and it's been essentially what we call the bread and butter of how MBEP is and came to be, and wants to support the work. Now, to your question about is it driven just from members, we do conduct an annual membership survey. We are in active attempt at all times to be in active communication with our members by highlighting the great work that they do. We put out, a regional report every 2 weeks that mainly focuses on the great work of our partners and friends and stakeholders in the Tri-County region. That's one avenue. The other avenue, in pre-pandemic, we used to host a lot of in-person gatherings and conversations, critical conversations, of whether that was on water or housing or equity. So, and now that we're quasi sort of coming through it and people are a little bit more comfortable with in-person or hybrid, we hope to bring those programs back up, hopefully by the summer or at the end of the summer, because when I started, I came in at the height of the Omicron variant.
January.
Yeah, January. February, my family and I came down with COVID ourselves. We were out for 2 weeks. Right. So as a new leader coming in, it's in some respects was a little bit challenging, and for folks to really get to know me and start doing the in-person gathering. So we are really hoping that by the end of the summer that we can re-engage our members in person is something that they look forward to doing, something that's a value add for their membership, to have those conversations. And also, again, learn about what they want and need for their particular sector of work, and how can we help introduce them to folks that they would need introductions to. Right. So it's a myriad of things. Certainly our board members are also members. Pay annual membership
even
dues.
As individuals. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Well, their organizations are members of the MBEP.
Okay, great. Well, let's take another break, and when we get back, I want to ask you just for a little bit of some highlights of some programs or policy issues that MBEP has worked on to date, and then we'll go into specifically environment and climate. All right. Thank you, listeners. You are listening to Sustainability Now, and I am your host, Brooke Wright, with my co-host, Ronnie Lipschitz. And our guest today is Tahra Goraya, the new president and CEO of the Tri-County Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, aka MBEP. So thank you, Tahra. We've been hearing about what the organization is at large and its biggest goals around equity and environment and transportation, all sorts of things. What are some key highlights of things that MBEP has accomplished to date? And I want to point out those events you were just talking about were definitely a highlight, because I attended several of them and just absolutely gave the feeling of this whole region working together towards great goals. So I know those as a highlight. But what else? What are some of the policy issues or specific, broadband access you talked about? What are some things that MBEP has accomplished?
Wow, I would say quite a few things, much of which I'm probably, how should I say, my kudos to the team and my predecessor for bringing together just amazing sort of work on a number of levels. One of which is the housing white paper that we wrote back in, I believe it was 2018 or so. Now it's currently being updated as we speak. That's one of the seminal pieces of work that we were able to sort of do for the Tri-County region that informed the policies at the local county level. And many of our partners, even some members of our partners across the state, we're also part of a statewide network of similar organizations, sister organizations, so to speak, who do similar work in other regions, have also used as a blueprint, so to speak, or an example. And it really highlighted some key recommendations around housing. The other is for broadband. I think if, there's a central.
No, we can't move on from that. So you said it highlighted some key things about housing. Do you know what any of those key things are? I'm really interested.
Absolutely. There are quite a few. There's a set of 9 or so recommendations about how to approach housing from the climate point of view, for also the number of units, how to meet our goals as a region, as a city, why housing, first of all, the paper is really about why it matters. And every city and the state has mandated that there should be a certain number of housing units for cities and counties. Are cities and counties meeting those regional housing need goals? And how does one go about doing that? How do we make incentives for folks to be engaged in those conversations? So, so it's, again, the grassroots and the grass tops approach, recommending more transit-oriented, transit-friendly sort of housing, mixed-use housing, where it could be affordable for a wide number of folks, recommending employers to be also more engaged in those conversations, right? What can, whether you're in the hospitality industry, ag, health, tourism, how can they be part of also the conversation around driving housing? I know, most recently, I believe it was the Monterey County Office of Education has started engaging in those conversations about what part can they play, for example, in securing or developing housing for the teachers in the region, to attract high quality teachers, to sustain and keep them here. And part of that equation is housing.
Right.
There is not a single conversation I feel like I can have throughout at least not in my time that I've been here, that I can have without housing coming up, no matter what sector, what industry, what field you're in.
Right.
As a personal side note, I am one of those individuals, technically a C-suite executive, right, who's been recruited from Boston, but currently in temporary housing, waiting to see where we can A, afford to buy, B, what aligns with our needs of ours, with our young ones. I have 2 little girls, 6 and 7, in school districts. So, and I'm a privileged class, right? So, I'm part of a 2-member sort of adult household where my spouse earns, and he and I both can afford to be in this situation and take the time to make the right choice for us. But most of the individuals in this region cannot do that at all.
And what that does for business too, right? It's
Absolutely.
so destabilizing to have your staff kind of running around looking for housing.
Same goes for the healthcare industry. How do you attract and keep physicians? Same thing. Same goes for the teachers. Same goes for farm workers. The farm working community has largely in the past been very migrant and can still move, but in order to retain farm workers for the very, very valuable work that they do in our community to put the food on our tables, their families, their children need safe, affordable, quality housing so they can, study and live and support, and the parents can support the children. So there's a myriad of issues when housing is just so huge.
Right.
I feel like, and I don't feel, I'm not the subject matter expert on this either. I've got an entire team who does this work that I feel like whether you're looking at it from a purely economic point of view of the dollars that come in and out of a region, to shifting to the purely environmental sort of lens of the needs of water and land and infills and transportation and, reducing our carbon footprint. There's so many different angles to housing policy, and it's just endless.
Right.
And, how do we invest smarter? How do we make it less difficult for developers and less difficult for communities, municipalities, at the same time advance green economy and safe living spaces for all.
Right.
Our population is, we're not going to be able to retain our population and support the sectors in the way we need it to be supported if we can't have our housing supply increase.
Right. And are there any specific housing projects that MBEP is working on now?
There are quite a few. The one that I think most recently I was at a groundbreaking and very proud of. It's 1482 Freedom on Freedom Boulevard in Watsonville. And what I really am excited about for that, we broke ground a couple of weeks ago, and Eden Housing is taking the lead, is it was absolutely beautiful thing for me to witness in my time here, in that you had municipalities, you've got a nonprofit housing developer, you have an organization like ours, sort of shepherding this. You've got legislators, federal, state, and local, and community organizers. You had banks there who helped, with the capital. There was just so many individuals who touched this project. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful to witness, and it would provide affordable housing, mixed use affordable housing for a great number of people, farm workers set aside for farm worker housing, and others, and other vulnerable communities, and transitional housing as well. So it wasn't just and then you had an organization, for example, like 3CE, who's going to put in solar panels and other things. For me, that was a really beautiful thing to witness, and a victory to see the art of the possible. Like, it is possible to do. Mm-hmm. Some of these things do, however, take time and patience. And it's just often a test of patience. I was thinking, our staff have been working on it for years, and now it's finally, we broke ground. But part of it is also SB 35 that went into effect, I think, in January of 2018, where we did advocate for that. It provided a little bit more local control to streamline, for example, the permitting process, and to make some of these projects go online quicker than they do traditionally. So there's got to be a right balance of local control and sort of state mandates at the same time. How can we quickly make things happen? Because our folks need housing, our residents, meanwhile, waiting for this. That was 2018, right? And we're in 2022.
Right.
That's a long time in my mind, but it's longer for somebody who needs that critical housing, or a family who's got little ones that they need housed.
Right. And that's an argument sort of against having much local control, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some tension there, because
there's always tension.
When you have local control, things move too slowly to meet the need, but you get a lot of resentment. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. We live in that space of constant need to balance and pivot, because we will not always be able to make all of our members and stakeholders 100% happy.
Which I don't understand how you like that job then, because that sounds really hard to be around when you're always going to have somebody unhappy. But
well, you know what? I'm attracted, and I thrive in environments that are challenging, in that it forces me to learn as a person and as a professional. It forces, I think, when you have challenging conversations and a challenging environment or an issue like that, it forces all of us, not just MBEP, to be innovative, to be creative, and to learn to not be so entrenched in our positions. I think, which is why that project was just so beautiful for me to witness as a newcomer to the region, that yes, when we work together and put aside our ideological and political differences and truly look for what needs to happen, it is possible.
Right.
It is possible.
And maybe, not being too attached to one outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I'm saying switch topics, but it really isn't. To me, housing is so critical when you talk about climate at all. But I do want to switch to talk about specifically any climate initiatives that MBEP has right now. Can you share anything on that?
So for climate, we have opted to not necessarily have our own specific climate initiatives, in that we feel we're good as supporters of those who are the experts in this space. For example, there's a lot of great work that's being done by Ecology Action or Regeneración out of Watsonville. There are folks in the Tri-County Regional Climate Collaborative. And if you were to look from Santa Cruz down to Santa Barbara and Ventura, there is an entire, coastal community that's working on collaborative issues, climate collaborative issues, whether that's going after state and federal funding to actually bringing projects on. Our role is more to be supportive, whether it's looking for funding, adding supportive voice, convening those conversations, especially when it comes to, again, the issues of housing, right? So we cannot, like I said, we can't divorce ourselves out of that conversation. So that's probably our quickest and direct link. And the rest is more, how would I say, as a convener role, or more of a regional convener, or having conversations and advocacy around transportation, water. We did also partner with a researcher locally to do, for example, a white paper on water. And what does that look like, and where can we insert ourselves in that conversations, or how can we be supportive? I think in that space, there are a lot of people doing fabulous work. The question is, how can MBEP either bring to bear ideas happening in other parts of the state, or help leverage resources? For example, right now, we're one of the lead applicants on what's called a Community Economic Resilience Fund application to the state of California that asks folks to apply through the lens of inclusive economics and climate resilience. And so we're partnering intentionally with our climate collaborative in the region and our advocates in the region who have a better pulse on that, as well as supporting the work they're doing for the funds that they're going after.
Okay. Do you do the actual fund, like grant writing and such, for the whole coalition, or?
Not the grant writing. I think they have fabulous grant writers. Probably, it's playing a supportive role. Whether it's a letter of support, pulling data, providing other regional stats that they may need, and building inclusive tables. Once funded, all of us need to make sure that the tables are inclusive, that are representative of our entire Tri-County region, and these new set of fundings that are really looking at it from that lens. Is everybody at the table? Are the various sectors at the table? And how can we make sure that if they're not, how do we get them there?
Okay. All right. When we're back, let's hear a little bit more about that and what the aims are of that funding that you're going after. Okay. All right. You are listening to KSQD Sustainability Now, and we are your hosts, Brooke Wright and Ronnie Lipschitz. And we have our guest today, Tahra Goraya from Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. Thank you again, Tahra, for being here. We are getting towards the end of the show, and I want to just find out if you can share anything else really specific that MBEP has been working on in our region or is trying to work on right now. Oh, and I want to finish finding out about that climate grant you were talking about and what the goals are. Let's start with that. Let's start where we left off.
So I would say there's several opportunities I think that the state is presenting in terms of funding in the climate justice space. One is, it's called a Regional Climate Collaborative. It's being headed by Ecology Action, for example, and we're proud to support those efforts. There's another opportunity called the SURF opportunity. I think it's Community Economic Resilience Fund for short. People call it SURF. And the state of California is looking at funding 13 regions across the state. They've sort of cut up the state of California. We fall into the Central Coast. So from Santa Cruz all the way to Ventura. So our Tri-County region plus the Tri-County region of San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura are all part of this so-called Central Coast region. And so MBEP and our sister organization called REACH out in San Luis Obispo and Ventura EDC, Economic Development Corporation, the three of us will be going after this SURF dollars. And we're in the midst of actually writing that application. Is due in July, and hope to be the lead for our 6 counties. And essentially, the purpose of SURF is to promote a sustainable and equitable recovery from the economic distress of COVID-19. right? By supporting new plans and strategies to diversify local economies, develop sustainable industries, the whole purpose to create high quality, broadly accessible jobs in California. That's kind of the overarching sort of essence of SURF. It's to a tune of like 600 million or so. And it, again,
Wow.
sustainable economies across this diverse region. But and at some point figuring out ways that how do we foster long-term economic resilience and overall transition to like a carbon neutral economy. So before we get to that long-term vision of a carbon neutral economy, we're applying for a 1-year planning grant, which is 5 million across 6 counties. So across 6 counties, 5 million doesn't sound like a whole lot.
Right.
And the whole purpose is for us to build a very large and inclusive table from community-based organizations, folks, on the ground, our employees and our workers, all the way up to the grass tops of like whether they're CEO of organizations, municipalities, counties, WIB boards, EDCs, and everyone in between, making intentional effort also of communities that are historically not part of these economic development plans, like our Latinx community, our African American and API community, our Native community, communities that historically may not have been present. How do we build a table large and inclusive enough so that over a course of 1 year, our planning grant of 5 million, we could have those conversations? What is impacting, for example, communities in Pajaro Valley or Salinas versus San Luis Obispo, or what are the needs in Ventura? What are the similarities? What are the differences? Where do we align? Which industries are common, which are not? And how do we have those conversations across sort of, again, the grass tops to the grassroots, and how can everyone be part of those conversations? That's the crux of the application. That's the hope that so that 3 entities, we call ourselves Uplift Central Coast, MBEP, REACH, and Ventura EDC are the 3 leads on that. And our job really is more of a project management and building out that table. And then 1 year of like economic plans that reflect San Benito and Monterey and Santa Cruz and San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara, Ventura, and all 6 counties. Because what's unique is that, in some ways we're very similar because we are Central Coast communities. And Central Coast communities, are just not just in landscape, but just even in our economies are vastly different than the, accounting in the Central Valley,
right,
or the Inland Empire, or north of us, Sacramento counties. So I think the state's thought in all of this is being sort of very regionally focused on how those economic plans are developed and how do those communities look at economic resilience and the overall transition to a carbon neutral economy. So that's the biggest thing on our table right now, or on our plate, as we try to figure out how do we do that. I think MBEP has really great experience in the Tri-County region in building those tables and bringing diverse stakeholders to the table. We've done some tremendous work in Salinas Valley around Regions Rise Together, which was a project of California Forward, MBEP, and the Irvine Foundation. We did that during the pandemic, as a matter of fact, over a course of 2 years, which is a mini version of this in some ways. So I think we bring to bear a lot of expertise, and we're hoping we can leverage these funds to really put the Central Coast on the map and truly advocate for our unique needs on the Central Coast.
Right. And is like climate resiliency part of that too? Is it something looking at, because this is in response to this sort of lack of pandemic resiliency, right? Is where this funding has come from. So
absolutely. So it's all of that connected, right? It's what's equitable, what's sustainable economy. Those are the questions that we're being asked to address. How do we foster that, given that the regions are so diverse, and then within the regions, the diversity of people, the diversity of culture, the diversity of sectors and industry. And how can we create high quality jobs that are accessible for folks? And part of that conversation is, climate resilience and jobs that feed into that. And what are those green jobs, or how do we foster that? And then how do we work in partnership with other opportunities like the regional collaborative? They're working on one. And the K through 16 is also working on one. And yet, all of those frames are through a 6-county lens. So I think really for the first time, the state is kind of lumping regions and counties together to work together in a more intentional way and figure out what's common and yet what's different, what can be aligned, what cannot be aligned, and what can happen then regionally. And it also provides a great platform, in my mind, for advocacy. As someone who's worked, I've worked for a state legislator as a district director in LA, and I've worked for other organizations that were headquartered or based out of Los Angeles. The larger metropolitan areas or where the demographics are larger, I've seen a tremendous sort of collaboration of organizations coming together with very robust legislative agendas or advocacy agendas. And I don't see the same level of organization here. I think there are efforts, but they're not as cohesive. And I think this also provides that opportunity for us with one voice across the Central Coast to say, we're more than a flyover region. We're more than a drive-through beautiful region. We have real needs, and there's a lot of also amazing things happening, whether it's ag tech or the aviation space, right? Or our hospitality and tourism industry being more intentional of their sustainable practices and being more intentional even in the housing conversation now more than ever, that there's really a lot of amazing things happening. And how can we highlight that and then also leverage support from whether it's the state of California or the federal government or other private philanthropies? A lot of it is making that noise and letting folks know that we're more than a beautiful place.
Right. So we're getting towards the end of the time here. Is there anything that you want to add, anything that we missed and that you want the listeners to know?
I just think it's, I am just super excited to be here as a new leader of MBEP. I'm eager to, I think, know folks and the various collaboratives. Certainly the last 5 months, it's like, drinking through the proverbial fire hose, a lot happening, but in a good way. I think my major takeaway in the short time that I've been here is, like all communities that I've lived in, there's certainly political challenges or a number of challenges, right? But what I have witnessed also is the beauty in collaboration and partnerships. I've not seen it to the level that is present here. I know once we, like anything, once you start living in a place and you get really close to an issue, it's hard to see the positive. As an outsider coming in, I've seen so many positives and so many wins that I think collectively we take for granted. I think there's a lot of great, hardworking people who are passionate and committed to the region from all walks of life, from all different sectors, who mean well, who truly have that sort of, I think, fire in the belly to do what's right, because they want everyone to thrive and do well. I mean, certainly even businesses who, oftentimes get a bad reputation of, they're just all about the bottom line. And but I think they too have been just not very good at probably sharing their story of how they want their employees to thrive, their families to thrive. And when they're thriving, so is the company.
Right.
You don't have high turnover and absenteeism and labor challenges when your employees are also feeling safe and feeling like the environment in which they work fosters equity and inclusivity and their voice matters. Do we have a lot of work to do? Absolutely. A lot of work to do, but no more than other communities and other parts of the nation that I've lived in and worked in. Right. So I'm very happy to be here. I think it's a beautiful place. I'm eager to know folks and see how we can work together. I'm not coming in knowing or pretending to have all the answers so much. I love to work with folks and figure out how can we come up with answers together.
Great.
So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to. And, we invite folks to learn about us. Call me, email me, learn about becoming a member if you're interested. More voices, I think more opinions and ideas only make us stronger as an organization and definitely stronger as a region,
Great.
as stewards of all that we hold here.
Thank you so much, Tahra, for being our guest on Sustainability Now. And yes,
Absolutely.
listeners, you can find out more about the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership and Tahra at mbep.biz. And if you'd like to listen to previous shows, you can find them at ksquid.org/sustainabilitynow and Spotify, Pocket Podcasts, and other podcast sites. Thanks for listening, and thanks to all the staff and volunteers who make KSQD your community radio station and keep it going.
Good planets are hard.